The millionaire's office had that distinctive scent of polished leather and antique wood, a scent that blended power and tradition. The bookshelves, lined with hardcover books and rare objects, told silent stories of travel and conquest. The maid entered with light steps, balancing the day's to-do list in her mind. She wore her impeccable uniform, her apron tied at her waist, and her blonde hair pinned up in a practical style, though a few stubborn strands escaped, framing her face. He started, in the corner where the brown leather armchair stood, dusting the surfaces with firm, precise movements. Next, he approached the large mahogany desk, that imposing piece that always seemed to him more a symbol of authority than a mere piece of furniture. The wood shine reflected the soft light streaming in through the window, creating an almost solemn atmosphere. As he wiped the cloth along the side of the desk, his fingers brushed against a small protrusion. He looked closely and saw the discreet mark of a lock on the bottom drawer. It wasn't locked. Without much thought, he pulled the handle, and the drawer slid smoothly open, revealing organized papers, a gold metal pen, and a small black velvet box. His heart skipped a beat. The object was at odds with the formal, controlled atmosphere of the office. He picked up the box delicately, feeling the soft texture of the velvet beneath his fingertips. For a moment he hesitated. Maybe he shouldn't open it. Maybe it was too personal. But curiosity, that silent force that always finds a way out, prevailed. He lifted the lid slowly, and the air seemed to catch in his lungs. Inside, a dazzling ring lay atop the soft fabric. The central stone caught the light streaming in through the window, casting tiny, shimmering reflections on the wall. The perfectly polished band revealed craftsmanship of the highest quality. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a statement. Her first thought was obvious. It should be for his wife. But something wasn't right. The ring's style was delicate, romantic, almost youthful, very different from the extravagant pieces his wife usually wore to parties and events. His wife's jewelry was always heavy, striking, and meant to draw attention. This ring, on the other hand, seemed made for someone more intimate. She tilted her face, leaning closer to better examine the details. Discreet engravings ran along the side of the band, as if concealing a particular meaning. Her fingers almost touched the stone, but a distant sound made her freeze, footsteps in the hallway. The sound of soles echoed toward the office door. Quickly she closed the box and put it back in the drawer, but at the last second she hesitated. The lid didn't fit perfectly, and that might give away that it had been opened. She carefully adjusted it and pushed the drawer until she heard a soft click. She straightened, trying to regain the neutral posture of someone simply doing their job. The door opened. The millionaire appeared, impeccable as always, wearing a dark suit jacket that emphasized his erect posture and calculating gaze. He didn't seem surprised to see her there, but there was something in the way his eyes swept the room that made the air heavy. Without saying a word, he walked to the table, rested his hand on the top, and stared at her for a long moment. She tried to remain calm, but her heart was still pounding. Something was different about that day. A thick silence filled the room, as if any word could shatter the fragile balance. He gave her a slight smile, the kind of gesture that felt more like a curtain hiding what he really thought. "Finishing the cleaning?" he asked, his voice low, carrying a tone she couldn't quite decipher. She simply nodded, avoiding comment. As she gathered up the cloth and walked away, he discreetly opened the bottom drawer of the desk. His eyes dropped to the small velvet box, and for a moment the smile faded. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and even from behind she could feel it. She didn't know if he'd noticed someone had moved, but the tension was palpable. As she left, the soft sound of the drawer closing echoed behind her, a reminder that this wasn't just a forgotten object, but something of far greater weight. If you enjoy stories filled with tension, mystery, and twists that shake up everything you think you know about people, leave a like and subscribe to the channel now. Here, every detail is a piece of a puzzle that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. In the hallway, still trying to catch her breath, she realized the ring wasn't just an expensive piece of jewelry. It was a key to something much bigger and somehow connected to her. The ring rested on the dresser as if placed there carelessly, yet at the same time it seemed to occupy that space with the importance of a poorly kept secret. The metal reflected the soft light from the lampshade, and every inch of the piece seemed imbued with meticulous care. Accustomed to arranging every detail of the room with the precision of someone who knows not only the space, but also the habits of its occupants, she noticed the object before she'd even finished folding the last item of clothing. Her first impulse was to assume it was a gift for his wife. After all, it was a given, and it wouldn't be the first time she'd found little surprises waiting to be offered. But a second glance was enough to realize something was wrong with that. Assumption? The size was inappropriate. The band, thin and delicate, seemed made for younger, perhaps smaller fingers, and the design completely deviated from the taste his wife demonstrated in every piece of jewelry she had ever worn. There was no exaggeration, no exuberant sparkle or imposing shapes, characteristics that had always marked her style. On the contrary, the ring had a refined simplicity, an almost artisanal design, with soft lines and a central detail that seemed more handcrafted than shaped by high-end machines. It was a symbol of something more intimate, more personal, not a piece to show off at social events or lavish dinners. She leaned a little closer, tilting her head to capture every nuance of the piece. It was light, but it conveyed a strange presence, as if it had been designed to carry a history that didn't belong to it. She touched it with her fingertips, and the cold temperature of the metal sent an unexpected shiver through her. Her eyes, automatically, searched for the box or any other sign that the ring had recently arrived. Perhaps a receipt, a note, anything. There was nothing. Just it, alone on the piece of furniture, as if it were there to be found, but not by just anyone. Her mind began to work automatically, connecting information like pieces of a puzzle. She remembered that last week, the millionaire had left earlier than usual on 2 consecutive days without informing anyone of his destination. She also recalled that, on one of those days, he had returned later with a different expression, a heavier silence than usual, and now there was that ring that didn't match his wife's profile and seemed to have been chosen with a very specific intention. A look of doubt began to creep over his face, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but charged with meaning. It wasn't jealousy or envy, but an instinctive curiosity, fueled by the feeling that he was in front of something that could change the way people perceive him. He knew every corner of that house, every calculated gesture, every detail meticulously thought out to maintain appearances. So, what did such an object, so inconsistent with all logic, mean? She took a step back, but didn't take her eyes off the piece. It seemed as if the ring exerted a kind of silent magnetism, calling her back, as if wanting her to discover its history. The strangest thing was the awareness that the object didn't need to be there in plain sight. If he wanted to hide it, there would be 1,000 safer places. Leaving it on the dresser could be an oversight, or a test. Her heart raced as the questions multiplied. Who was the ring for? When had it been purchased? Why did it seem so different from anything she'd ever seen in that house? And, more than that, why did his presence awaken such a subtle yet persistent discomfort in her? She knew any rash move could expose her. At the same time, the urge to find out more began to override her common sense. What would happen if she asked? What if he realized she'd noticed too much? Or worse, what if that piece was the tip of a secret that once revealed could never be forgotten? The air seemed thicker, and the silence in the room grew heavier. There was something there that didn't fit, something that clashed with the absolute control he maintained over every detail. It was as if the ring were a whisper from a parallel life, a hint that what she knew about this man was only a carefully edited part of the real story. If it were you, would you pretend you didn't see anything or investigate until you found out the truth? She was still holding the box, feeling the rough texture of the wood beneath her fingertips, when a subtle sound broke the silence. Footsteps. They weren't hurried, but neither were they slow enough to seem casual. They had a steady rhythm, as if the person knew exactly where they were going. The hallway, which until then had seemed distant, suddenly became a bridge too short to offer any chance of escape. Her heart raced immediately, and her reaction was instinctive, to close the box. She did it quickly, but not quickly enough to feel natural. The metal latch clicked shut with a small, muffled click, a sound that, to her, sounded like an alarm. She barely had time to slide the box to the corner of the table when the door opened and the millionaire's figure filled the space. He entered unhurriedly, but with that presence that needed no sudden movements to assert authority. His eyes, as soon as they met hers, seemed already knowing. There was no confusion, no innocent curiosity. It was a gaze laden with reading, as if he were observing not only her posture, but also her breathing, the imperceptible tremor in her fingers, the slight shift in her gaze toward the closed box. The room seemed to shrink, and the distance between them became shorter than the actual space indicated. He took 2 steps, his right hand in his pocket, his left loose, as if at ease. But she could tell his relaxation was a carefully constructed facade. When he spoke, his voice was low but firm, with a tone that didn't need to rise to intimidate. "What were you doing here?" he asked, and the words hung in the air for a few seconds, as if echoing in the corners of the room. She took a deep breath, trying not to let her hesitation show. In that moment, every fraction of a second before her answer felt like a minefield. Any pause, any shift in her gaze, any change in tone could betray more than she wanted to reveal. Her body wanted to react defensively, but she knew that would only confirm her suspicions. So she tried on a neutral, almost disinterested expression, as if her presence there were a pure coincidence. But his posture didn't change. He didn't move, didn't look away, didn't offer any clues about what he believed or didn't believe. He simply maintained that heavy silence, the kind of silence used as a weapon to make others say more than they intended. The box was there, within reach of a simple gesture from him. All he had to do was reach out and touch it, unlatch it, and end any attempt to hide the truth. But he didn't. On the contrary, he seemed more interested in observing how she would handle the pressure. Time stretched, and each beat of her heart seemed louder. The air carried a dangerous mix of curiosity and risk, and the simple fact of standing before him, with the closed box and whatever was inside, created a fine line between maintaining control or losing everything. Her answer could define not only that moment, but also the next steps in this strange dance between secrets and discoveries. And I ask you, if it were you, would you meet his gaze and make up a convincing excuse, or would you confess exactly what you were doing? He noticed. It didn't take much, a second, an almost imperceptible detail, the way she looked away too quickly, as if trying to hide the fact that she'd noticed something. But, contrary to what one might expect, he didn't react abruptly, didn't ask questions, didn't change his tone. He simply let the silence do the work for him. He pretended not to care, but there was something in his eyes that said exactly the opposite. A brief, almost imperceptible glint, as if he were mentally noting that reaction for later use, and that in itself made the air in the room heavier, slower, denser. The waitress saw through the game. She sensed there was something he didn't want to come to light, but at the same time he wasn't trying too hard to hide it, as if he wanted to gauge how far she would dare to go without her having to say a single word. The mood wasn't one of open confrontation, but of a silent contest, where every gesture, no matter how small, carried calculated weight. And the more she tried to decipher what was happening, the more she realized there was a layer of hidden intentions behind his every expression. His gaze, though calm, had the intensity of someone observing without missing a beat. It was almost uncomfortable, as if each blink were a strategic pause to study her. She tried to maintain a neutral posture, but her heart was racing. It was the strange combination of being in front of someone who controls the situation while simultaneously hinting that he also has something to lose. He didn't seem concerned about denying it, but he also didn't seem willing to confess. And that intrigued her even more. The silence between them stretched for a few seconds that felt too long. The kind of pause that isn't empty, but loaded with unspoken messages. She felt the weight of his gaze and knew that if she continued to stare, she might reveal more than she wanted. So she looked away, pretending to need to straighten something on the table, but deep down it was just to break eye contact. He, in turn, smiled discreetly. Not a friendly smile, but the kind that reveals the other person has been noticed, that their movement has been registered and in some way anticipated. She wasn't sure if it was what she saw, what she felt, or what she imagined, but there was a secret there, something that wouldn't hold up if exposed to the open air, and yet he seemed confident enough to keep his mask intact. That confidence, more than any words, was what made her uncomfortable, because it wasn't the confidence of someone with nothing to hide, but of someone who knows exactly how to hide it. Silent tension gripped the moment, creating a space where anyone could have broken the barrier and asked directly, but neither of them did. Instead, he was the one who decided to end the game, at least for now. With a controlled and natural tone, he changed the subject to something completely banal, as if nothing had happened. And this move, though seemingly innocent, only reinforced the feeling that there was much more to it than he was letting on. Because sometimes, more revealing than words is the rush to talk about something else. And in his case, this shift wasn't to end an uncomfortable situation, but to protect something. The look she saw, that moment when the truth almost slipped out, wasn't an accident. It was a calculated risk, as if he wanted to see the effect it would have on her. And that effect, he realized, was exactly what he'd hoped. And if you were in her place, would you insist on finding out what was behind that look, or would you pretend you didn't notice anything, knowing that this silent game could change everything? As she serves coffee in the dining room, she notices that his voice, coming from somewhere farther away, isn't at its usual pitch. It's not the neutral, polite tone he usually uses when serving customers, nor the casual, slightly distracted tone he adopts when speaking to his wife. It's a lower tone, but one laden with intention, as if each word were hand-picked and weighed more heavily than it should be. The sound of cups being placed on the tray seems to blend with the slow rhythm of the conversation. And even without seeing his face, she senses there's something in that call that deserves closer attention. She arranges the tray on the table, but keeps her body tilted slightly to catch every syllable that escapes. What catches her attention is not just the contents, but the way he pronounces the sentences. There's a strategic calm, a care not to arouse suspicion, and yet each pause between words seems to hide more than it reveals. And then she hears, "The special gift." The expression alone carries a curious weight. A special gift for whom? And more importantly, special in what sense? What could be so valuable to deserve such a calculated description? Before she can think, the second part comes. The right time to give. Now the connection between the phrases sets off a red flag in her mind. This isn't about a last-minute birthday gift. The intonation suggests something planned, with time, perhaps even a touch of secrecy. And this right time indicates that this isn't something that can be given, casually or improvised. It's something that depends on specific circumstances, as if the value of this gift were tied not only to the object itself, but to the impact of when and to whom it is given. She feels a chill run down her spine when she realizes he's not talking to his wife. She recognizes the kind of intimacy contained in the words, the tone of complicity that isn't built overnight. There's no mistaking it. The conversation carries a subtext of closeness that doesn't fit the role of an attentive husband, but rather that of someone sharing secrets and plans with another person, unbeknownst to everyone else. The most disturbing detail is that, in his life, every action seems meticulously planned. And if this conversation is happening, it's not out of carelessness, it's because he believes no one else is listening. She moves away just enough to be unseen, but she doesn't let go of her focus. Her mind begins to work, piecing together a puzzle with the pieces it has. The mysterious envelope from before, the sudden change in behavior, and now the phone conversation with terms that carry more meaning than they appear. The special gift may not be literal, it could be symbolic or even dangerous, depending on what he considers special. And the right time to deliver indicates an expectation, an invisible countdown, as if everything were being built toward a climax known only to him. Her ego, at that moment, isn't satisfied with merely suspecting. You want confirmation, you Want to understand how far he's going with this silent game? Knowing you've picked up on something that wasn't meant to be heard gives you an invisible advantage, a feeling that you're entering a restricted circle of information, not because you were invited, but because you managed to open the door yourself. This puts you in a position he doesn't realize, but one that could be decisive when the time comes to confront him. Now every word he says that reaches her ears stops being just part of a conversation and becomes a fragment of a larger enigma. And she knows that from today on she won't be able to look at him without wondering who will really receive this special gift. And why? If it were you, would you try to find out who is on the other end of the line, or would you wait to see what they will do at the so-called right moment? The next morning, the sun filtered through the garden, creating irregular patterns on the stone floor. She hadn't expected to find him there, much less receive his direct, unpreambled invitation, "I need to talk to you." There was no formality in his voice, but neither was there the authoritative tone she'd come to recognize. It was something quieter, almost confessional, as if the words carried a weight that could only be laid in an open space, away from the walls and the echo of unwanted conversations. He gestured to a wooden bench under the shade of an ancient tree, and even though her instincts urged caution, she felt drawn to the mix of serenity and tension he conveyed. The air was filled with the damp scent of freshly cut grass, and with each step she took, she realized it wasn't just a physical movement, but a measured, meticulously calculated approach. When they sat down, he didn't begin with vague phrases or neutral topics. He looked her directly in the eye and asked almost disarmingly, "Are you happy with the life you lead?" The question, so simple on the surface, carried a weight of intimacy that surpassed any professional protocol. It wasn't curiosity, it was probing. It was the kind of question only asked by those willing to hear a truthful answer and deal with it. She took a deep breath, trying to formulate something that wouldn't reveal more than she wanted, but the intensity of his gaze dismantled any defenses. There was something in the way he watched her, unhurriedly, that made it seem as if every wrong answer had consequences, and every right answer could change the course of something that wasn't even fully defined. He didn't deviate. There was no nervousness on his face, but neither was there that distant coldness that marks formal relationships. It was as if, for a few minutes, all that existed between them was that tiny space of air and silence, charged with something neither of them could name. When she responded quietly, he smiled slightly, not a smile of sympathy, but a silent acknowledgement, as if reading between the lines more than what was said. And then came the next questions, each one getting closer to personal territory. Do you trust people easily? What makes you stay in a place even when you want to leave? When was the last time you did something just for yourself? With each sentence, he leaned a little closer, closing the distance. There was no physical contact, but the closeness was tangible, almost palpable in the way his body occupied the space, imposing presence without invading. The distant sound of dry leaves being stepped on mingled with the rhythm of her breathing, which was now faster, though she tried to hide it. For a moment he let his gaze travel over the contours of her face, slowly descending as if mentally recording every detail. There was no rush, and perhaps that was why the air between them was so thick. She found herself watching the movement of his hands, steady and calm, as if everything were under control, yet at the same time carrying a restrained energy that suggested he wasn't one to waste an opportunity once. The decision was made. He then paused not to end the subject, but to extend that silence that weighs more heavily than any answer. It was as if he were waiting for her to fill the space with something she hadn't yet dared to say. His eyes fixed, didn't demand, they invited. But it was an invitation that made it clear that, if accepted, there would be a price. At the corner of his mouth, a smile almost never quite formed, as if he knew the game was being played on a field where the rules were unclear, but tension was the only comprehensible language. She realized that despite all the control she tried to maintain, there was something in her responding to that atmosphere, an ancient impulse that didn't depend on logic or convention. It was impossible to ignore that encounter in the garden, under the shade of the tree, wasn't just a conversation. It was a mutual probing, a reconnaissance of territory, a silent testing of boundaries. When he tilted his head slightly to the side, like someone observing a work of art and seeking to understand its essence, she felt the fine line between professional and personal already blurred, even though neither of them had physically crossed. The wind gently rustled the leaves above them, and for a moment she imagined that from a distance they might have looked like just two people having a quiet conversation, but anyone who came closer would sense that the air there wasn't neutral. It was charged, like before a storm, and perhaps this was the first time she realized that the real danger lay not in what he said, but in what he chose not to say, leaving silence to spark curiosity and possibility. If you were in her shoes, would you respond honestly, or would you use silence to maintain control of the situation? The scene unfolds almost mundanely, but the impact is like a silent punch. She wasn't looking for anything, wasn't spying. She simply picked up the phone he left on the table as he walked away to answer the door. The cha-cha. Screen lights up automatically with the sound of a notification, and before she can look away, the image appears clearly. A ring, perfectly framed, glistening as if every detail had been designed to impress. But it's not the jewelry that catches her breath, it's the text just below the photo. "It's ready for you, I can't wait to put it on your finger." The words are short, direct, charged with intimacy and promise. At the top of the message, the name appears clearly, and it's not his wife's. The moment seems to stretch, as if time has decided to slow down so that every fraction of a second is etched into her memory. Her mind begins to race in opposite directions. Part of her wants to put down her phone and pretend she didn't see anything. Part of her wants to swipe up and read the entire conversation, open every detail, extract the answers that now burn like acid. Her heart beats so fast she can feel it in her fingertips. It's not just jealousy or surprise, it's the poisonous mix of having her intuition confirmed and realizing you were more right than you'd like. Recent memories begin to align, forming a much more coherent and much more dangerous picture. The call that dropped when she entered the room, the awkward silence during dinner, the glances that seemed to drift off into nothingness. Everything now makes sense, and the central piece of this puzzle is that message flashing on the screen, with the name that, until that moment, meant nothing, but now becomes an urgent enigma. Who is it? How did they meet? And why is such a symbolic gift so charged with intention being prepared for someone who is not his wife? Her ego feels the full brunt of the impact, not just from having discovered something hidden, but from realizing there was a parallel game going on right under her nose. There's a deep unease, almost a wound to her pride, at the thought that, while she moved, believing herself to be in control of the narrative, another story was unfolding in the shadows involving people and feelings that shouldn't be there. At the same time, there's a strange sense of advantage. Knowing this before he realizes it gives her a privileged position. It's like holding a card that, if played at the right moment, could completely change the course of events. The seconds pass and she still doesn't decide what to do. Her thumb hovers over the screen, tempted to open the conversation and see more. Part of her wants to consume every word, every clue, until there's no doubt. Another part prefers to keep the discovery intact, like a loaded weapon ready to be used at the right moment. The sound of approaching footsteps snaps her out of her trance. She quickly locks the screen and places her phone exactly where it was, as casually as possible. When he enters the room, nothing in her expression betrays what has just happened. She knows how to disguise herself like few others, and now, more than ever, she understands she needs to. Ultimately, the message wasn't just proof of something hidden, but definitive confirmation that what was to come wouldn't be simple. From that moment on, his every word, every gesture, every silence will be observed and measured, and within her, the flame of curiosity and distrust mingles with something even stronger, the need to understand how far he's willing to go with this secret. And you, if you found such clear proof on someone's cell phone that something big and hidden was happening, you would be. She holds the cup firmly, but the gesture is merely a mask to hide the tension coursing through every muscle in her body. The sentence comes out of her mouth as if speaking something trivial, yet carries a carefully measured venom. Some gifts can change lives. The intonation is soft, almost distracted, but beneath it lies a calculated weight. She's not just talking about objects, and he knows it. It's a subtle provocation, but direct enough to set off a warning bell. He remains motionless for a moment, watching her as if trying to gauge how bold she is, and whether there's more behind that statement than she's willing to admit. The silence that descends is dense, as if every second were a test of endurance. His gaze doesn't waver. He doesn't ask anything, doesn't interrupt, just analyzes her with the patience of a predator unhurried. His eyes roam her face, searching for micro-expressions, trying to grasp whether it was an innocent comment or a deeply charged insinuation. She maintains her posture, her chin held high as if unafraid of being deciphered, but her heart beats rapidly, aware she's treading on shaky ground. What's at stake here isn't just an exchange of words. It's a silent duel to see who will expose themselves first. Then he lets out a half-smile, and it's in this detail that the game changes. It's not a smile of sympathy nor of contempt. It's an ambiguous, calculated gesture that could mean, "You can't fool me," or "I'm curious to see where this goes." This smile doesn't provide answers. It just opens more doors for questions. He knows the power of uncertainty is greater than any direct statement. She feels goosebumps crawl, not from explicit fear, but from the discomfort of being in front of someone who not only understood what she meant, but also seemed willing to join in without telling her the rules. The atmosphere between them becomes almost palpable. Every look, every pause, every breath seems part of an unwritten script, where tension is the protagonist. She realizes he doesn't need to raise his voice or move abruptly to exert pressure. His control lies in the calm with which he holds the moment, in the way he transforms silence into a weapon. And that half-smile is the tip of the blade that touches skin without cutting, only to remind her it's there. She thinks about the risk of going too far. Maybe I touched on a point I should have left untouched, but at the same time, there's an impulse inside her that refuses to back down. It's as if in that moment she feels she can't, and perhaps doesn't even want to, quit this game. Her ego can't accept the idea of being intimidated by just a look and a smile. There's something about him that provokes, that instigates, that makes fear mix with a dangerous desire to discover what's behind the mask. He, for his part, seems satisfied with the effect he's had. He doesn't respond to her provocation with words, but with presence. And sometimes that's much more powerful. He leaves her, uncertain, wondering whether she passed the test or just put herself in the crosshairs. It's in this kind of veiled confrontation that people lose or gain the most, because it's not about winning an argument, but about controlling the narrative without ever having to say everything. And if you were faced with someone who responded to your provocations only with a calculated silence and an enigmatic smile, would you retreat to preserve safety, or would you advance to discover what lies beyond that barrier? His gaze held hers in a way that brooked no escape. It was as if in a single instant the room had shrunk and everything else vanished, leaving only that conversation suspended in the air. She was still trying to decipher every gesture, every nuance of his expression, as if the truth lay hidden in the subtlest details. Then, bluntly, he broke the silence. His voice was firm, but with a calculated cadence, as if someone was weighing each word before letting it slip. The ring was not for his wife. The confession fell between them like a stone in a silent lake, creating invisible ripples that spread throughout the room. For a moment, she thought he would finish the sentence, say the name, reveal the whole truth. But he didn't. The emptiness after those words seemed deliberate, as if he knew the absence of details would have more impact than any complete revelation. The silence that followed was unusual. It wasn't the silence of someone with nothing to say, but of someone. Carefully choosing what to keep hidden, he took a step forward, closing the distance between them. His breath was felt from his closeness, but there was no touch, no hasty gesture. Just that calculated closeness, as if he wanted her to feel the weight of what he hadn't yet said. Then he leaned in slightly, and in a low, almost intimate tone said that the right moment will explain everything. These words echoed strangely, not like a romantic promise, but like a veiled warning. as if there was. Something that could only be understood when the pieces of a larger game were aligned. She felt the air between them thicken, charged with unspoken meaning. It was a tension that stemmed not just from the possibility of involvement, but from a force field where trust and danger walked side by side. The ring, which until minutes before might have been merely a symbol of traditional commitment, was now an enigma. Who was the true recipient, and why so zealously conceal it? This question throbbed in her mind, but his presence, the way he stared at her, made any attempt at questioning turn into hesitation. His every small movement seemed choreographed, as if he'd rehearsed it to convey exactly what he wanted her to feel. Curiosity, insecurity, and the strange sensation of being on the verge of crossing a line he wasn't sure he should cross. The tension between them was impossible to ignore. There was no room for impulsive gestures, not for lack of desire, but because a shadow hung over. That moment, the certainty that any advance could trigger unpredictable consequences. She realized it wasn't just about the ring or who would receive it. What truly disturbed her was the notion that he was in control, that he chose what to reveal and when. This put her in an uncomfortable position, torn between the need to know and the instinct to protect herself. Even so, part of her was drawn to the promise implicit in his words. The right moment sounded like a gateway to a truth that would change everything, but also like a carefully laid trap to hold her attention and trap her steps at the pace he dictated. The room seemed to have a life of its own. The light filtering through the curtains created a play of shadows that highlighted the contours of their faces, further intensifying the atmosphere. She could hear her own heartbeat, and she was certain he could too. There was no need for overt touching or gestures. Closeness spoke louder than any physical contact. And this closeness wasn't neutral. It carried the promise of something intense, but also the risk of getting lost amidst fragmented truths. The ring, though invisible at that moment, was present as a silent symbol between them. And she knew that from then on, every word, every look, every silence would take on a different weight. He had planted a seed of expectation, and even though she tried to resist, she felt it already taking root. The question wasn't just who the ring was for, but what role she herself would play when the right moment arrived. And you, if you were in her shoes, would you risk waiting for the right moment, or would you demand the truth now? Night falls over the house, and the silence that fills the hallways seems denser than usual. The lights are dim, casting elongated shadows that move gently with the sway of the curtains. She walks slowly, as if each step is guided by an impulse she can't explain. Entering his office, the dim light reveals only a few familiar features. The leather armchair, the bookcase filled with books, and on the desk something gleaming under the soft light of a lamp. It's the ring box. The object sits there, in the center, as if purposefully placed there to be seen. There are no locks or secrets here, just the evidence that whatever is about to happen has been carefully planned. Beside it, a small handwritten note with a single word, tomorrow. Her heart races. The handwriting is firm, unhesitating. That one word, short and simple, carries immense weight. Tomorrow. What does it mean? A request? A promise? An ultimatum? The possibilities flash through her mind like flashes of light in the darkness. She steps closer, the sound of her footsteps barely audible on the carpet. With her fingertips, she touches the cool surface of the box. It's small, delicate, but what it represents seems immeasurable. The air in the room seems to shift, becoming more charged. She knows this ring isn't just a piece of jewelry. It's a symbol, a gesture, a watershed moment. The mere fact that it's there in plain sight, undisguised, means something is about to happen, and that her life, and perhaps that of others, will never be the same again. The note rests like a silent sentence, a reminder that time is relentless, and that when tomorrow comes, so will the answers. Her gaze scans the room, searching for signs that might explain who the ring belongs to. No name, no clear clue, just that enigma that surrounds her and awakens a mixture of anxiety, fear, and curiosity. She feels the weight of a choice she doesn't yet know she will have to make. It's as if all of destiny is suspended in a single day that hasn't yet begun. At that moment, her breathing slows, as if trying to prolong the moment before reality swallows her. Her fingers close for a second around the box, but she pulls back, leaving it exactly where it was. Maybe moving now opens doors that can't be closed. Maybe tomorrow must arrive on its own. The camera zooms in on her face. Her eyes reflect unease and fascination. Her slightly arched eyebrows reveal questions she doesn't dare ask. Her mouth, half open, seems to want to say something, but her voice fails to come. It's as if the weight of that moment is so great that words can't support it. And then, as if obeying a silent command, she takes a step back. Her gaze remains fixed on the box and the note, as if trying to memorize every detail, every shadow, every stroke of the writing. The darkness around her intensifies, and the ambient sound diminishes until it almost disappears. Her focus is solely on herself, on what she sees, and on the tomorrow that approaches like an inevitable tide. The screen slowly fades to black, leaving the audience with the unsettling emptiness of not knowing whose ring it will be. It's a silence that doesn't bring peace, but rather a growing sense of anticipation. The question hangs in the air, unanswered, inviting everyone to imagine their own versions of the truth. If this story has captivated you so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel now. In the next video, you'll discover the true identity of the person for whom the ring was purchased and why this revelation could change both her and the millionaire's lives forever. Don't miss it.